The 8th console generation is coming to an end, and I thought I'd share some of my favorite video games from this generation before we set off into next gen. Now, I know there are still games coming out that could potentially make this list, games like Cyberpunk 2077, but I am really excited to make this video, so I'll just update it as time goes on. Anyway, let us get started. Assassin's Creed Origins for its recreation of Egypt. I fell in love with the world, its immersion, the way it looked and sounded, the ambient music, the intrigue and atmosphere of the open world, the gameplay which was incredibly fun, specifically the combat which I really enjoyed and fell in love with. I find the impact of each blow to be incredibly satisfying, so much so that I could spend hours in the gladiator arena. I loved the variety that combat had to offer, the different weapons and bows, the ability to play stealthy or to go all out. The enemies were also relatively fun to fight and weren't completely stupid and was incredibly diverse. Each boss battle in the gladiator arena was made up of a unique boss with a unique fighting style. There was also a lot of enemy variety in terms of the open world. I cannot recall all of the enemy types right now, but some that come to mind include your regular bandits, archers, commanders, Roman assassin-like enemies, and brute, all of which, as far as I can remember, had their own fighting style. Archers would keep their distance and avoid close combat. The same went for the Roman assassin-esque type enemies. They kept their distance and only approached once successfully stunning Bayek with smoke bombs in order to quickly deal damage before increasing the distance between you and them again. Whereas the brutes would come running at you with brute force. All of this made combat feel like a finished product, something that was crafted with care to keep the player engaged and entertained while also making the combat worth their time. I know Assassin's Creed Origins wasn't a perfect or revolutionary game, but it had a lot of elements that I really admired and enjoyed, which is why it is one of my favorite games of the 8th console generation, and I absolutely love it. I can easily jump back into Origins and have a blast. While there are a lot of things to praise in Red Dead Redemption 2, I think what I love so much about this game is how easy it is to pick it up and play it. Even after finishing the main game and clearing up most of the content on the map, RDR2 remains entertaining and interesting to play. It is one of those games where you don't constantly need to follow an objective, clear out a bandit camp, or follow a question mark on the map to have fun. You can simply start it up, get on your horse, and have a blast. And I think a big reason for that is because Rockstar nailed the world, the way the player interacts with it, and the way it interacts with the player. But that's not the only reason why I walked away from this game being absolutely amazed. There is also the incredibly emotional story that absolutely crushed me. I was depressed for nearly 3 days after finishing the main game, and it felt like I was mourning the death of a real person. Red Dead Redemption 2's storytelling remains unmatched to this day, and I have been longing for another experience like it. I am sure to remember this game for a very long time. I had a ton of fun playing it, and I still do every now and then, which is why it is one of my favorite games of the 8th console generation, and also of all time. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is almost a game that I gave up on. I remember at the time I got this game, I was not into fantasy, I didn't even really know what an RPG was, and the entire concept of the game wasn't interesting to me at all. For the most part, I hated playing this game, and I got sick of it really quickly. Though I have to admit I do remember brief moments where the game excited me. However, I didn't follow through and instead played something else. Then one day I watched my friend play and something caught my attention. I think he was doing the quest with Kira where Geralt and she spends the night in the woods, and I'm sure you know what happens when you choose the correct set of combinations. Now, when I first witnessed this, I was completely surprised. And I'll admit, at first I was drawn to this game merely by the fact that I could occasionally fuck an attractive sorcerer or the occasional peasant. But after actually playing the game for a bit, I became quite invested in its world, in its lore, and in Geralt's journey. So much so that as of today, The Witcher is one of my favorite franchises ever. It got me into reading the books, and I hated reading. Not just that, it also opened me up to way more experiences, because I realized that you really shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I fell in love with the stories in this game, the characters you meet, the lore, the creatures, the world, and just everything about it. The Witcher 3 is an incredible video game, and it offers an amazing single player experience that I will always cherish and always crave experiencing again. It is one of, if not my favorite video games of all time, for many reasons, far too many to list them all in one video. I always looked down on The Last of Us, and I'm not quite sure why. I remember seeing the game often, but always resorted to the idea that it was boring, it's just another zombie game, and that I wouldn't enjoy it. And I know this game technically isn't an 8th console generation release, as it released for the previous gen. However, I only played it for the very first time this year. And because of how this game blew me away, I just have to mention it. It truly is one of the best video games I played on the 8th console generation. Not necessarily for its gameplay or for its take on zombies, but for one reason and one reason only: Ellie and Joel. I cannot tell you why, because I find it difficult to understand it myself, but Joel and Ellie is what I love so much about this game. After finishing it for the very first time, I experienced something very similar to what I experienced when I first finished Red Dead Redemption 2. My emotions were all over the place. I was constantly obsessing about the game and the events that took place. I felt sad and I wasn't sure why. Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Last of Us are the only games that I can recall that really fucked me up emotionally after completion. And I think if a game can do that, it does a fantastic job at immersing you within its world and characters, delivering a true cinematic experience. That's a hard thing to pull off, and for that, I have to mention this game. I absolutely love The Last of Us, and after 7 years, I finally understand why it gets all the praise that it does. It's an incredible experience and one of my favorite video games of all time. Out of all of the games that I've played on the 8th gen console, The Last of Us Part 2 takes the cake for having the most satisfying gameplay. Killing enemies in this game feels fucking great. The gunplay is smooth and challenging enough to make pulling off headshots require some level of skill. It isn't just aim and shoot. As a result, pulling off a successful headshot results in a feeling of gratification. This gratification is further fueled by the excellent feedback that the game provides after impact. Bullets cause enemies to lose limbs, heads explode, pieces of flesh get splattered onto walls and floors, and it all sounds, looks, and feels fucking great. Because of the amazing feedback and sound design, I fell in love with the loop of this game. I couldn't wait to be thrown into an area full of enemies. The combat is a major step up from the first game and is damn addictive to engage with. Furthermore, The Last of Us Part 2 is a gorgeous video game. I'm all for games that look good visually, and this game didn't disappoint. As a result, I took my time exploring each level as I really wanted to get the most out of each area. It's also worth mentioning that the atmosphere of some of these levels are fucking incredible. Not only did I enjoy the gameplay of this game, but it is also the most invested I've been in a story from start to finish. This game constantly had me at the edge of my seat, and dear God, some of the cinematography is out of this world. But the best parts of The Last of Us Part 2 were the parts where Joel and Ellie shared the screen. With all of that said, I don't consider Part 2 necessarily a perfect game, as the pacing did affect me somewhat. Regardless of this issue, The Last of Us Part 2 still brought me tons of joy, more joy than any other game I can think of, and because of that I have to include it on this list. There you have it. These are my favorite video games of the current generation. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what are some of your favorite 8th gen games. Also be sure to like the video and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. With that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in another video hopefully soon.